Moses' encounter with God on Mount Horeb is one of the most pivotal moments in religious history, shaping the course of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. It's a story that has been retold and reinterpreted countless times, yet its significance still resonates with us today.
We've all heard the popular narrative. God appears to Moses in a burning bush, commissions him to lead the Israelites out of slavery, and reveals the Ten Commandments.
But how much of this is really based on the biblical account, and how much is myth or misconception? Many of us have been taught that God's message on Mount Horeb was essentially a list of do's and don'ts, but is that really the core of the message? We often assume that the Ten Commandments were the primary focus of God's revelation, but what if I told you that only 2 verses in the entire Bible describe this encounter? What if the popular narrative is missing a crucial aspect of God's message? It's time to set aside our preconceptions and explore what the Bible really says about this pivotal moment.
The biblical account of Moses on Mount Horeb is scattered throughout the book of Exodus, but the most critical passage is found in Exodus chapter 19. Here, God descends upon the mountain in a spectacular display of fire and smoke, and then utters a seemingly enigmatic message. But what exactly does it mean, and how does it relate to the Ten Commandments? Scholars have debated the interpretation of this passage for centuries, with some viewing it as a call to moral obedience and others seeing it as an expression of God's covenant with Israel. But what if we're looking at it through the wrong lens? What if God's message wasn't primarily about rules or even about Israel, but about something much deeper? One of the most surprising insights into this passage comes from the Hebrew language itself. The word often translated as commandment or law is actually more accurately rendered as instruction or guidance. This subtle shift in meaning has profound implications for how we understand God's message on Mount Horeb. Rather than a set of rigid rules, God's revelation is an invitation to a deeper relationship, one that is rooted in love and trust. As we delve deeper into the biblical account, we discover that God's message is not just about moral obligation, but about identity and purpose. It's a call to remember who we are, where we come from, and why we exist. It's a message that speaks to the very heart of our human experience, resonating with our deepest longings and fears. One of the most striking aspects of God's message on Mount Horeb is its emphasis on presence and encounter. This is not a distant, abstract deity, but a living, breathing God who desires to be known and experienced. The very fact that God appears to Moses in a burning bush, speaking to him face to face, upends our conventional notions of divinity and challenges us to rethink our understanding of the divine. As we reflect on the significance of God's message to Moses, we're reminded that its relevance extends far beyond ancient Israel. This is a message that speaks to the universal human experience, one that transcends time and culture. It's a call to rediscover our deepest sense of purpose and meaning, to reorient ourselves around the one who is the source of all life.
Many of us have been taught to believe that God gave Moses the Ten Commandments on Mount Horeb, but is that really the whole story? Did God simply hand over a set of rules, or was there more to their encounter? I think it's time to challenge our assumptions and dig deeper. We've all been guilty of oversimplifying this pivotal moment in biblical history, and it's led to some pretty significant misconceptions.
For starters, Mount Horeb isn't even mentioned in the traditional biblical account of the Ten Commandments.
The story actually takes place on Mount Sinai, which is often used interchangeably with Horeb. So what's the difference, and why does it matter?
Then there's the issue of whether God actually spoke to Moses verbally, or if the encounter was more of a spiritual experience.
The truth is, the biblical account leaves a lot to interpretation, and that's exactly what we're going to explore today. Another common misconception is that God's message to Moses was primarily about rules and obedience. While the Ten Commandments do play a significant role, they're not the only thing God revealed to Moses on the mountain. In fact, the biblical account is full of symbolic language and metaphors that hint at a much deeper, more complex message.
So what did God really tell Moses, and how can we uncover the underlying meaning behind the words? Let's dive into the specifics of the biblical account and see what we can learn.
In the book of Exodus, we're told that God appeared to Moses in a burning bush, commanding him to remove his sandals because he was standing on holy ground. This strange, symbolic encounter sets the tone for the rest of the story, hinting at a deeper level of spiritual awareness that's required to truly understand God's message.
The language used in the biblical account is also worth exploring. When God speaks to Moses, it's often described as a voice that's accompanied by thunder, lightning, and smoke.
What does this mean, and how did the ancient Israelites understand this kind of divine communication?
By examining the language and imagery used in the biblical account, we can start to uncover the deeper themes and motifs that are at play. One of the most fascinating aspects of God's message to Moses is the concept of the divine name, often translated as I-A-M-W-H-O-I-A-M. This enigmatic phrase has been interpreted in countless ways over the centuries, from a statement of God's existence to a declaration of divine freedom.
What does this name really mean, and how does it shape our understanding of God's nature and character?
As we delve deeper into the biblical account, we start to realize that God's message to Moses was far more nuanced and complex than we often give it credit for. It's not just about rules and obedience, but about the very nature of reality and our place within it. The encounter on Mount Horeb was a pivotal moment in human history, one that continues to shape our understanding of faith and spirituality today. So what did God really tell Moses on Mount Horeb? At its core, the message is one of freedom, love, and transformation. It's a call to awaken to the deeper realities that underlie our everyday lives, to recognize the sacred in the ordinary, and to live in harmony with the divine. This is the essence of the message, and it's one that continues to resonate with us today. Thanks for joining me on this journey into the mystery of Mount Horeb.